Once there was a little boy named Ludwig who lived in a small town in Germany. But Ludwig's home wasn't a happy place. His father Johann was a strict man who wanted Ludwig to be the best musician in the world. Johann thought that if Ludwig worked hard enough, he would be famous like the great Mozart. But Johann's idea of hard work wasn't kind. Every day he made Ludwig practice the piano for hours. If Ludwig made a mistake, his father would yell at him, often even hit him. Ludwig's little hands would hurt, and tears would sometimes roll down his cheeks, but he did not stop playing. He could not stop playing. As Ludwig grew older, something amazing happened. He turned all the pain he felt into music. Music so beautiful that when people heard it, they felt like their hearts were singing. Even when Ludwig grew deaf and could not hear his own music anymore, he did not stop. He kept creating, letting his heart guide him instead of his ears. The poem Beethoven by Shane Koyczan tells the story of this little boy who grew up to become one of the greatest musicians in history. Hi everyone, this is Roni Datta from onlinefreenotes.com. Before we begin the discussion, if you are looking for questions and answers related to this poem, check out the description or visit our website onlinefreenotes.com, where we provide solutions for different subjects of different classes across different boards in India. Also, please like, comment and subscribe to our channel if you like our videos. This will really help our channel grow. With that being said, let's jump into the poem.
Listen. His father made a habit out of hitting him.
The poem starts with a direct instruction. Listen. It wants us to pay attention closely. It then talks about Beethoven's father, who did not simply hit him once but did it often. The line made a habit suggests that the father's violent behavior was normal in their household. The poem wants us to see that before he became a great composer, Beethoven was just a child who suffered under a cruel father.
See some men drink some men, yell some men hit their children. This man did it all, because I guess all men want their boys to be geniuses.
These lines compare different ways that some men show anger or frustration. It says some men drink too much, some men shout, and some men hurt their children. Beethoven's father did all these things. The poem suggests that maybe the father thought making his son perfect at playing music could make him a genius. Perhaps he thought that beating and pressuring his son would make him the greatest musician.
Beethoven, little boy, living in a house where a name meant nothing, living in a house where mercy had to be earned through each perfect note.
We see Beethoven again as a small boy, not a famous composer yet. Calling him little boy makes us remember he was a child who deserved kindness, not cruelty. He is in a home where his family name does not matter. No matter who he is or might become, he gets no respect just from being himself. Mercy, which means kindness or relief from suffering, was not given freely. Beethoven had to earn it by playing music without any mistakes. Think about that, a child feeling that love and safety depended on playing a piano note correctly. It shows how heavy the burden was. Every wrong note could mean more pain. This turns music, something that should be beautiful, into something that must be perfect just to avoid punishment.
Tumbling up through the roof to tickle the toes of angels whose harps couldn't hold half the passion that was held in the hands of a young boy who was hard of hearing.
Here, the poem describes Beethoven's music as something that goes upward, as if these notes could rise through the roof of his house all the way to the sky, touching the toes of angels. This is a strong image that shows how brilliant his music was even as a boy. Angels are imagined playing harps, but their harps do not have half the emotion that Beethoven's small hands bring out of his piano. Here, hard of hearing could be a reference to the fact that Beethoven could not hear correctly, yet he created sounds that could make angels wonder. It is like saying his music was so full of feeling that even heavenly creatures could be surprised by the depth of his art. This also makes us think, how can someone who struggles to hear create such great music? It reminds us that greatness can grow even in the darkest and quietest places. However, it is important to note that Beethoven's deafness started when he was in his 20s.
Beethoven, who heard his father's anthem every time he put finger to ivory. It was not good enough. So he played slowly, not good enough. So he played softly, not good enough. So he played strongly.
These lines bring us back to Beethoven's father's voice, like an anthem that repeats in Beethoven's mind whenever he touches the piano keys, which are often called ivory because old piano keys were made from elephant tusks. No matter how Beethoven played, slowly, softly, or strongly, his father always said it was not good enough. It shows a cycle of trying harder and harder, never feeling that you have done well. It is like a never ending test he cannot pass. This makes us feel sorry for young Beethoven. He cannot make mistakes without facing his father's anger. The poem wants us to picture this child bending to his father's will, trying many ways of playing, yet failing in his father's eyes.
And when he could play no more, when his fingers cramped up into the gnarled roots of tree trunks, it was not good enough.
Beethoven plays until his hands hurt and swell up, becoming numb and twisted like old tree roots. This is a strong image. It shows how physically painful it can be to play so long without rest. Still, his father does not accept this effort. Even after pushing himself to his limit, Beethoven is told his music is not good enough. This is a cruel sin. A child forced to keep going until he is in pain, yet still told he fails. It shows how impossible his father's demands were. The father wants perfection, but perfection is not something you get by force. Instead, this creates suffering and sadness, planting seeds of pain in the child's heart.
Beethoven, a musician, without his most precious tool, his eardrums could no longer pound out rhythms for the symphonies playing in his mind. He couldn't hear the audiences clapping, couldn't hear the people loving him.
As time passes, Beethoven grows up. He becomes a musician known for great music, but he loses his hearing, which should be the most important sense for a musician. His ears stop working. He cannot hear the music he creates or the cheering crowds who admire him. He cannot hear applause, which is how people show they love his music. Losing his hearing is like a painter losing sight, yet Beethoven kept composing. The poem wants us to see how brave this is. It means he did not stop creating beauty just because he lost his ability to hear it. He trusted what was inside his mind, inside his heart.
Couldn't hear the women in the front row, whispering Beethoven as they let the music invade their nervous system.
Beethoven cannot hear even the people who admire him most, the women in the front row who might whisper his name with admiration. The music they hear affects them deeply, going straight into their bodies, filling their nerves with energy and feeling. Invade their nervous system means the music enters them, changes how they feel inside, makes them tremble or shiver. This is how powerful Beethoven's music is. Even though he himself cannot hear, his art enters others and moves them in ways words cannot fully explain. It shows us that Beethoven's music is larger than his own ears. It lives inside the hearts of listeners, making them feel something strong and unforgettable.
Like an armada marching through firing cannonballs, detonating every molecule in their bodies into explosions of heavenly sensation.
These lines compare Beethoven's music to a fleet of warship or armada moving forward and firing cannonballs. But instead of causing harm, the explosions happen inside the listeners' bodies as feelings of joy and wonder. Detonating every molecule sounds violent, but here it means the music breaks open the listener's normal state and fills it with bursts of feeling. Heavenly sensation suggests feeling so strong and pure that they feel like a gift from above. It is as if Beethoven's music can shake people from inside, reminding them that sound can carry great power, emotion, and even healing, while at the same time he himself cannot hear that sound.
Each note leaving track marks over every inch of their bodies, making them ache for one more hit. He was an addiction.
These lines say that every note of Beethoven's music leaves a mark on the listener like lines on the skin. It is not a real wound, but it is as if the music etches itself into their memory. The listeners ache for more, like someone addicted to a feeling they cannot resist. Calling Beethoven's music an addiction shows that people love it, they cannot get enough.
And kings, queens, it didn't matter. The man got down on his knees for no one, but amputated the legs of his piano so he could feel the vibrations through the floor.
These lines say that it did not matter if you were a king or a queen. Beethoven bowed to no one. He would never kneel to show respect to a person, yet he did something extreme to keep making music. He cut off the legs of his piano so it would sit flat on the ground. Why would he do that? Because he could feel the vibration of the music through the floor. Since he could not hear, feeling the vibration was how he understood his own music. This shows incredible determination. He found another way to connect with sound. He turned to touch instead of hearing. It also shows how determined and clever he was, refusing to stop creating just because of a setback, no matter how huge.
The man got down on his knees for music, and when the orchestra played his symphonies, it was the echoes of his father's anthem, repeating itself like a broken broken record.
These lines say that Beethoven would kneel for music, not for people. He respected music enough to bend down and feel it. When the orchestra played his work, the poem suggests that the old pain of his father's voice returned. The father's cruel words and demands might echo in Beethoven's mind like a broken record that repeats the same piece of sound over and over. Even as a grown man, famous and admired, he could not escape the memory of those times his father said, "Not good enough." It shows that the scars left by his father never fully healed. Instead, they became part of the music itself.
It was not good enough, so they played slowly. Not good enough, so they played softly. Not good enough, so they played strongly. Not good enough, so they tried to mock the man, make fun of the madness.
Here, the poem returns to the pattern of not good enough. Now it seems like the orchestra tries different ways of playing, just like Beethoven once did as a child. They play slowly, softly, strongly, but it is never enough. They even try to mock him, maybe to copy the madness he showed. This could mean that even the best musician cannot reach what Beethoven could imagine. His standards were so high, or maybe his father's voice was so loud in his mind that no one could satisfy the demands of that memory. It shows that perfection is unreachable, that trying too hard to please a harsh voice only leads to frustration.
By mimicking the movements, holding their bows a quarter of an inch above the strings, not making a sound, it was perfect.
The orchestra pretends to play but does not let the bow touch the string. This creates silence. This silence becomes the perfect answer, the only way to play not good enough perfectly. They realize that maybe the point was never the sound, but the struggle and the silence inside Beethoven's head. Silence becomes music in itself, a moment free of mistakes. This is a surprising twist. How can playing nothing be perfect? It suggests that quiet can hold meaning. For a man who lost his hearing, silence might be as strong as any note.
See, the deaf have an intimacy with silence. It's there in their dreams.
These lines say that those who cannot hear know silence very closely. They understand quiet like someone who has spent years inside a quiet room. The silence is not empty for them, it is part of their world, even in their dreams. For Beethoven, who was deaf, silence was not just the absence of sound, it was something he lived with. It may even have helped him think differently about music. It suggests that silence has its own kind of music, a place where the loud demands of the world cannot enter.
And the musicians turned to one another, not knowing what to make of the man trying to calculate the distance between madness and genius.
The musicians look at each other, confused. They cannot understand Beethoven's strange way of being. They try to measure how far madness is from genius. Is he crazy or is he brilliant? Or both at once? This question is hard to answer. Some great creators seem odd or strange. Beethoven's action may look mad, but his music shows genius. The poem wants us to see that sometimes greatness and madness are closer than we think. There is no easy way to measure what makes a person a genius. The musicians stand there puzzled, learning that what they thought they knew about music might not be enough.
Realizing that Beethoven's musical measurements could take you to distances, reaching past the towers of Babylon, turning solar systems into symbols.
The poem says that Beethoven's music can travel further than ancient towers, like those of Babylon, an old city known in stories. His music can even reach as far as solar systems, turning them into symbols. This is a way of saying his music goes beyond normal measures. It can reach very far in imagination. His sounds could connect distant ideas and places that are impossible to touch in real life. This shows that Beethoven's art breaks the limit of what we think music can do. It steps into a place where sound and silence, memory and imagination come together to create something that feels huge and timeless.
That crashed together, causing comets to collide, creating crescendos that were so loud they shook the constellations until the stars began to fall from the sky, and it looked like the entire universe had begun to cry.
This part of the poem uses big images from space like comets and stars to describe the power of Beethoven's music. His music is compared to giant sounds that can shake stars out of their places, making the sky look like it is crying stars. This is not about real space but about the feeling inside people who listen to his music. It means that music can make people feel things so large and strong that they cannot be described in small words. It suggests that Beethoven's creativity can stir up emotions that feel as big as the universe. His music can break open hearts like comets colliding, turning tears into stars and stars into tears.
Distance must be an illusion. The man must be a genius.
These lines say that maybe the idea of distance is not real. Maybe there is no line between madness and genius, or between Beethoven and the universe he creates in sound. All those differences disappear when we understand his music. The poem states that he must be a genius, someone who can transform life's painful silence into something mighty. This is the poem's final judgment on Beethoven. Despite everything, he is a genius.
Beethoven. His thoughts moving at the speed of sound, transforming emotion into music. And for a moment it was like joy was a tangible thing, like you could touch it.
Back to Beethoven himself, he moves ideas like a sound wave, changing feelings into music. For a moment, his music can turn joy into something you can almost hold. Usually, we cannot touch feelings, but Beethoven makes them feel close, as if they become real objects. This tells us that music can change how we experience emotions. It can bring them out of our minds and make them feel real, physical, and strong.
Like for the first time, we could watch love and hate dance together in a waltz of such precision and beauty that we finally understood. The history wasn't important to know the man. All we ever had to do was listen.
In the final lines, the poem says Beethoven's music is so powerful that it shows love and hate dancing together, two strong feelings moving in harmony and grace. By seeing these feelings dance, we learn something deep about human nature. The poem says that to know Beethoven, we do not need to study every part of his history. We do not need to remember the cruelty of his father forever. We do not need to know every fact. All we need is to listen to his music. His music contains him. his struggles, his pain, his joy, his courage, and his love. The poem ends by bringing us back to the first word, listen. It reminds us that listening is enough to understand Beethoven, that music can hold a life story inside its notes. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and share. Tell us which poem or story you want me to explain next. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for such videos. Do check out onlinefinotes.com, and as always, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.